So Senate Bill 4, yesterday we third read Senate Bill 4. It's getting a lot of attention, and I think the attention is, first of all, justified. We should be, quite frankly, we should be looking at every one of these bills that are coming out of the Senate chamber and analyzing them for what their impacts are. For me, this was a bill that on one hand I did have reservations about, but on the other hand, there were some things that I was very supportive of that ultimately caused me to be a yes. So here in front of me, this is a copy of the bill that was third read and finally passed yesterday in the Senate. And if you read through it, the first part of the bill deals with transparency requirements. As I've gone around the state, the fact that it's very difficult to get information from public school districts has been a real concern for parents. And this tries to address that by requiring a portal to be created that parents can go to online, where very specific items are going to be made accessible to the parent. And it codifies that the parent has a legal authority to get these items. Now, I filed legislation that goes about this in different ways, but I like the intent of this bill to do that. And if you read through some of the specifics, the actual language of the bill talks about the requirement to put report card grades on there, the requirement to have all of this maintained in a web page. In fact, let me scroll to this just to give an idea of some of the things that were codified and will be transparent for parents right now. It talks about parents are going to be able to inspect materials provided to their minor within 2 business days upon request. I can't tell you how many stories I've had of parents coming to me who are concerned about something that may be taught or showed in a classroom, that they call in the school and want to see it, but they can't get access to it. This talks about the parents are going to be able to get the name of any person teaching or instructing their child in the classroom. That's a good transparency mechanism. It talks about the right to receive information about individuals and organizations receiving school contracts and funding. You know, we had a big issue in Francis House School District where the funding that was set aside, voted on by the people for a new high school, was done in a way where there's a lot of questions about whether or not the funding was going into contracts that were below board. And parents were asking a lot of questions and couldn't get answers. So this strengthens their ability to get that kind of data, and I think that's a good thing. The right to access information about the collection and transmission of their minor child's personally identifiable information. That's something that I think parents need to know. I mean, we saw in the COVID environment that information was being collected on our minors, and parents need to be aware. We need to take further steps because I'm not real comfortable saw a lot of this information being collected in the first place, but parents need to have a right to have access to that information. And we've had a school system that has really dragged their feet and not been open and transparent with parents. So these are all good things. In fact, there's another piece in there that was put in there into Senate Bill 4 that I like, which talks about in the event that school districts use electronic devices, it requires the school to put blocks in place on those electronic devices that prohibit any kind of pornographic material or sexually explicit material from being put on those devices and then used by students. That's a protection that we've particularly put in law. So these are all the things that I think went into a vote for me that was ultimately a yes. Now, that's the good. Here's the bad. There were a couple things in there I didn't like. I didn't like that in order to get these kind of transparency mechanisms through, we had to make a concession to the public school systems. We actually increased their funding to the tune of about $40 million. I didn't like that. I'm not, and I've spoken at this at length about the fact that we shouldn't be increasing funding to schools that aren't producing the outcomes that we want to see. So that was a concession we made. Senator Koenig made that concession. I disagreed with it. I would vote no, certainly on a standalone bill, but in order to get this language through, I was willing to do that. There's also a lot of concerns going to having to do with the so-called the CRT language in there. On one hand, there's good language in there that tries to prohibit and starts to trying to build a fence around our children being exposed to hateful language, that whether it's the critical race theory or 1619 language. On the other hand, the bill also includes some exemptions that it makes it pretty easy for administrators in school districts to get around that. I didn't like that. I'd like to see a lot stronger language placed in that, and that's why as this bill goes over to the House, I think there's going to be an ongoing discussion and engagement from folks on this side of the building to make sure that if there's any way that we can strengthen that language, and I think there is, that those get incorporated to the final product. So overall, it wasn't a perfect bill, but I have talked about transparency for a long time for parents. I think this moves us in the right direction. Ultimately, that's why I was a yes.